Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we are talking with Kip Boyle, CISO, CEO, and founder at Cyber Risk Opportunities. Kip, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Alex. Great to be here.
And we're going to continue our talk on cyber resilience versus traditional DR and business continuity. So let's start off with a good one. Organizational culture and preparedness. What culture shifts are required to move from a traditional BCDR type thinking towards a more resilient cyber resilience way of thinking?
Yeah. Oh, there's some real key ones. Okay. And I see this over and over again. I think what I'm about to share is very common. And so that's good news, bad news. The fact that it's common means like, okay, if you're struggling with this, you're not the only one. And so, but you do have to overcome it. And there's lots of people trying to overcome this. So there's an opportunity to learn from each other. So I think the first most important cultural shift is we have to get away from IT will handle it to this is everyone's problem. Okay. Resilience lives in the business, not just the server room. And, why do we have this idea that it lives in the IT silo? There's a lot of reasons. I think, I could say, well, it's an easy button, right? If I have a risk in my organization, the easy button, whatever that risk is to try to, pin it onto a certain functional area, right? Like if my big risk right now is I'm not collecting money that people owe me in a timely way, I can go to the accounts receivable team. I can go to, the customer service team and I can say, look, you got to get on top of this. You got to get collections coming in. And I think that that's natural. However, this issue of cyber resilience really cuts horizontally throughout the entire organization because every part of the organization has role appropriate things that they can be doing to help make the entire organization resilient because there's things that people in finance can do that people in IT just cannot do. And so we got to get organization, we got to get out of this silo mentality. That's probably the biggest one.
Well, it's interesting that you said that because I was working with a client and I asked them about, the cyber event. How are you going to validate your data? And they said, well, IT will do it.
Hmm.
And I just looked at them and said, do they have access to that data now? And they went, well, no, of course not. So how would they know what to do in this kind of a situation? You're not going to
Precisely.
suddenly
Yeah.
give them access. They're not even going to know what they're looking at if you gave them access.
Just because you have access doesn't mean you understand a lick of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. Now, there's another cultural shift that I would like to point out too, which is failure. Look, we have to normalize conversations about failure, failures that could happen and failures that have happened. And and we have to, I think, we'll be better off if we can look at failure not as something that's awful and evil and to be avoided at all costs, although that's definitely how it feels for most people. But I really believe failure is the most effective teacher that there can be. We will learn more from our failures as human beings than we'll ever learn from our successes. What's missing is the normalization that it's okay to talk about failure. And a lot of organizations I work with, it's not okay to talk about failure. It's a very squirmy, difficult conversation. And I think the harder it is to talk about it, the more difficult it is to become more resilient. I'll give you one specific example. If I'm a frontline uh, person in the organization, I'm talking to customers, and I get a feeling that something's off, I get a strange email or something, or I have a strange conversation with somebody. Well, if I'm not incentivized to report things like that, but rather if I get punished or if I feel like I'm going to get punished by reporting something like that, then that's completely counterproductive to being resilient because you got to catch this stuff early. The best resilience comes from early detection.
I agree. And I think some of that comes down to things like, I just wrote it down here, performance reviews and things like that, because luckily I'm self-employed. I give myself a 10 out of 10 every year now. But but in organizations, you do your performance review, and what are they always telling you? Work on all these things that you failed on.
Right. It
Very,
feels
very little.
punitive and
Yeah,
bad.
yeah. Very few times did you ever get a nice big long list of all the things you did right.
Yeah,
It's always
exactly.
focused on the failure. So to your point, am I really going to want to bring forward something that went wrong or identify? It's like,
Yeah.
I want to stand
If
back because I know it's
if
going to bite
I
me later on.
yes, if I don't have explicit permission from my supervisor, the person who writes that performance appraisal that you just talked about, to mention things that possibly have gone wrong, I'm not going to.
Yeah. And someone who does bring that forward is seen quite often as a troublemaker.
That's right. You're not a team player. Why are you thinking so negatively?
Yeah. But really, they're thinking as a risk person. I had a
They are
conversation
trying
with,
to.
yeah, with Trina
Yeah.
Railkoff the other day, and that's how she expressed it. Sometimes these people are coming forward and pointing these things out and asking questions because they're thinking with a risk management mindset. And that's what we
Right.
need to be resilient.
We do. And there's a whole episode we could do just on that
Yeah.
topic, to be honest.
I know we could. So let's talk about some of the training that, how do we get
Hmm.
things to turn around to change? What kind of
Hmm.
training or what kind of things do we need to do to help us become more cyber resilient?
Right. Well, tone at the top is probably one of the foundational elements for making a cultural pivot. And what I mean by that is that if supervisors don't explicitly make it okay to talk about failure modes, you have to ask yourself, well, why aren't those supervisors doing that? And then you just kind of follow it up the management hierarchy. And at some point, you get to the CEO or the executive director or whoever's in charge, and that person has to say it's okay, and then cascade that through the management, live that, actually walk that talk. Then it's a possibility that people on the front line of the organization, those individual contributors, will be able to feel that it's okay. Now, if I can get that tone at the top dialed in, now we can start talking about, okay, what's going to be good training versus not good training, right? The not good training is going to be kind of performative, checkbox type exercise, where the training materials themselves are kind of generic, and doesn't really speak to your unique culture, your unique priorities, right? It's just like stuff that you've gotten out of a cereal box, and you've given, you spread it out to people because you're like, okay, checkbox, training's done. A really like bad example that I see sometimes is, you schedule the tabletop exercise because you've got some audit imperative or something, like some regulatory requirement, and the CISO just gets a bunch of people together, narrates the scenario, everybody kind of nods their head and goes, okay. There's no pressure, there's no surprises, nobody's really learning. Okay. And so that's not good training. Good training is going to be, maybe the same people sitting around the table, but now we're going to have maybe some surprises. We're going to have some injections that are deliberately designed to make the plans not work the way people thought that they were going to work. Um, and other things that are realistic too, like, oh, your crisis communication person is out on FMLA right now. They can't help you. So now what are you going to do? And people have to be willing to squirm a little bit in order to be able to go through this good training. But that's, a lot of people don't, a lot of adults don't like experiential learning. That's what that is.
Well, I've been in tabletops, I'm sure you have too, where you do have all those senior people at a table and everything is tickety-boo, bunnies and rainbows,
That's right.
and you've got the CEO or CISO or somebody in the room and everyone's just deferring to them, and
Yes.
whatever they say, that's when everyone's nodding their head.
Right.
See, yeah, we're all in
Yeah.
agreement. We're in great shape. It's like,
And
CISO doesn't
yeah.
even know what they're talking about. They only know everything up here. They don't know all the
Now,
stuff down
now
here.
guess what? You've just called back to an earlier talking point about the difficulty of senior decision makers seeing cyber resilience as an IT problem,
Hmm.
right? If you put it in the silo, then when you go to the tabletop exercise, if you're not in IT, you're just an audience member at that point.
Yeah,
Not good.
yeah. Agreed. I've seen that happen, and we actually, myself and the other facilitator, we quickly scribbled an inject where the person that was being deferred to suddenly got a call and they had to leave. It's like, there, now you're out of here.
That's
They can
great.
still sit there, but no, can't say anything. You're not here.
That's perfect, right? And it can be uncomfortable to do that, right? People can come up to you later on and say, "Man, you really threw me a curveball. I look stupid," right? So there's some risk that people are going to be not happy that you did that. Maybe they're going to have some ego. Again, a culture that doesn't celebrate struggle and failure as a learning aid.
Yeah.
So these are real things.
So let's look at the future outlook.
Sure.
Where do you see cyber resilience and business continuity and disaster recovery going? They joining together or somebody, leading the pack? How do you see things moving forward based on the current threats that we're all facing?
Yeah. Well, the easy thing for me to do is to say, well, yes, my BCDR buddies should just, come on over and join my team and I'll be in charge and, everything will be great. I don't think that's true, okay? First of all. Um, I don't think that's practical because business continuity and disaster recovery is its own domain, and there are things that need to be attended to that really cyber is probably not going to be all that helpful or certainly not a major player. I'll just give one example that may seem kind of extreme, but it's happened, right? I worked in a building one time that was co-located just 20 feet from an interstate, and it was an elevated section of the interstate. And when we were on the fourth floor of the building and we looked out, we were looking at the cars whizzing by. And one of the scenarios we came up with one time was, what if a tanker truck full of a noxious chemical jumps that rail and crashes into our building? What do we do? Well, we have to get the hell out of there, right? And so it's like, that's not really a cyber issue. It does not present as a cyber issue. It's not, right? Cyber stuff is going to kind of come out, but please don't ask me to lead that. There's just, there's too much, non-cybery kind of things that need to be dealt with there. A hurricane would be another great example, or earthquake response, right? The primary, focus there is not on the computer systems, although that will come in later. So I don't think we need to merge in the way where one is in charge of the other. But I do think that there needs to be a tremendous amount of collaboration. And I'll give you an example of one thing that I did. So I did a project one time with BC DR team, a really, really good one, at a very large medical center in Manhattan. And I took a look at some of their materials, and they were using these countdown tables and count up tables, and I'd never seen that before, and I thought it was genius. And so in the cyber world, we don't typically get multi-day notice like a hurricane's coming. We can see it on the radar, right? We can track it. We know it's coming. Start filling up the sandbags. So the countdown table aspect didn't really make a lot of sense. But the count up tables, where you're saying, okay, what are we doing in the first hour? What are we doing in hours 2 through 3? What are we doing in hour 6? Right? I just thought that was amazing. And so I've actually adopted that approach in my incident response plans because I think it's just a really great way to get that execution discipline into a cyber context where we sometimes struggle with that because our tooling just isn't really set up for
I can't help but ask then about documentation. Should there be
it.
lots, more, or tighter and focused?
Well, my preference is there can be lots of documentation because planning is everything, right? And so plans are artifacts that you've been planning. So I think that's kind of a symptom of a planning organization, which is really very good. But when you're actually in the moment, the truth is, I don't expect anybody to reach for those plans. They're too freaked out. They might not even be able to get to those plans. I've seen this so many times, Alex, where it's like, where's your plan? Well, it's in SharePoint. Why can't you open it? Well, SharePoint's down. Right? And we don't believe in 3-ring binders with 3-hole punched paper in them anymore. So, okay. So what I do is I encourage kind of like a laminated two-sided card with those count up tables. What should you be doing now? Right? One side's red because we're, like, we're in the middle of it. Everything's awful. The other side, maybe an orange because, okay, now we're 6 hours into it. We kind of know what's going on. And it's not nearly as an uncontrollable thing as it originally felt like it was. So That's how I try to balance it.
Yeah, like a placemat type thing. You can
Yeah,
carry in your notebook or,
yes,
just fold it up, put it in your notebook and with you all the time. And
exactly.
gives you enough information to move forward and be able to action, but
Hmm.
doesn't get you stuck in a detail where you aren't thinking anymore.
Yeah, you don't want analysis paralysis.
Right.
You don't want to try to figure out what does this paragraph mean? No, stay out of that. That's not good.
Any final thoughts you'd like to share on cyber resilience and versus traditional BC and DR?
Yeah, I just want to again talk about you said what's the future, and I just wanted to say a couple more things about that.
Yeah.
Um, I think what we can expect to see both in the cybersecurity domain as well as in the BCDR domain is we're going to see more AI powered attacks that are going to move faster than humans can respond. We're already seeing cyber criminals using artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence, to improve the effectiveness of their phishing attacks, and do we see deep fakes, and people are really starting to fall victim to AI powered attacks. And so we have to start to think about how can we move faster, because if your adversary is automated and you're not, and you're getting attacked at machine speed, well, what are you going to do? How do you deal with that aside from just being overwhelmed and sitting on the floor next to the wall going, I don't know what to do. I'm
With tears
completely,
rolling down your face.
yeah, I'm totally messed over here, right? I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think we need to continue to be focused on is supply chain compromise. Now, a lot of people, when I say that, they think of like physical goods, right? Like imports in crates, moved around on trucks and ships and stuff, and that's true. But software supply chains are also something we need to be thinking about. And there's already plenty of examples of software supply chains that have been compromised that have caused real world damage, where our business continuity and disaster recovery friends are going to be super, super helpful. NotPetya was a cyber attack from 2017, and it took Maersk, the shipping giant, it took them offline for the most part. And because their systems weren't available, they couldn't move freight because they had no idea which containers were belonged to whom, because all those records were in a computer system that they couldn't access. So you've got all these trucks lining up outside the gate trying to drop stuff off, pick stuff up. They can't go anywhere. Well, that's not really a cyber, like if you call me and say, Kip, what do we do about that? I'm like, I don't know. Tell the trucks to go home. I don't know. So these hybrid situations, I think supply chain is where we're going to, continue to see a lot of them. And then one other thing I want to mention, because I know we're running out of time, but I think this is really important, is if you have any critical software as a service providers, your ERP, for example, is not in a machine. It's not in an AS400, in a room that you control, but it's in a cloud provider. Okay, guess what? That's not bulletproof. Okay. I
Mm.
just had a customer in the manufacturing space. They experienced an outage with their cloud ERP, and the cloud ERP provider was able to restore the records. But you know what they didn't keep and couldn't restore was the business rules.
Mm.
So they had to scramble to try to reconstruct the business logic in their ERP system because that was not covered by the standard data backup capability of their SaaS provider.
Wow.
Yeah,
Lucky them. I'm sure they were having a great old time with that one.
the whole production line stopped.
Wow.
They sent the whole workforce home for the day because they had no idea what they should be building, and they had no idea which spare part, or which part they should reach for next to assemble the items that they were manufacturing. It was a disaster. Ah,
Wow.
look, I said it.
Kip, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about cyber resilience versus traditional DR and BC. I really appreciate it.
I'm really glad you invited me. Thank you. And for all my friends out there who are BCDR professionals, I hope nobody took offense to anything I said. And I'm happy to hear from you if you think that, I got something wrong.
Yeah, feel free to leave comments down below.
I'm
So
not afraid of failure.
that's right. Thanks, Kip. Really appreciate it.